Hello and welcome back to the Entertainment Vortex. Today we are doing our spoiler review for the Black Panther. Now all three of us were really anticipating this movie, and doing the non-spoiler review was very hard for us because we wanted to say so much more. There's so much we said that we had to cut out because it would have been leading you to an answer, and we don't want to do that until you see it. So if you're watching this review, you need to have watched the movie because we are going to spoil all of it. But this is the place to be if you want to get into that discussion with us. Don't forget to leave questions or agree or disagree down in the comment section below because we're just going to dig into this movie really deep. So the first thing that comes to mind, and where I think we should start this, is with the hype. Obviously, this movie had a ton of hype around it. It had a 99% on Rotten Tomatoes going into the release of the movie. Everybody was saying, multiple critics were saying that it was the best Marvel movie out of all of them, which is obviously a pretty big high bar because there's been a lot of great Marvel movies. This was the movie. So going into it, I'm like, well, based off of everything they say, I try not to get my hopes up, but they really got my hopes up. So coming out of the movie, not being disappointed, that is amazing. So I'm curious to know for the two of you, and we'll start with you, JB, how did the hype affect your experience with the movie?
So normally when a movie comes in with a lot of hype, it's something where I temper my reactions accordingly. So I feel like if something has a big hype, I have to kind of tamp that down on my own. I have to force myself to be like, all right, so this is just another movie. It may surprise me and it may be a fantastic film, but I don't want to put myself in a situation where I don't have my wits about me when I go see the film, because I don't want to just be like blinded by all of this hype and then end up not enjoying the film or missing out on things because of that. So for me, that was what I had to do. Even seeing the trailers, listening to the music that was coming out from the movie, I had to dial myself back a little bit. I was like, I'm getting really excited about this because obviously we've talked about this several times. I'm the Marvel guy here. Some of my favorite content that's ever been created, in every single medium that it's been created in. I had to make sure that I didn't jump into this from the standpoint of a Marvel fanboy and had to jump in from someone who critiques movies.
And as a DC fanboy, I have to say that the hype can be very dangerous. And I feel that some of the DC movies, for example, people's hype and their excitement got so high that they took a good movie and they called it crap because they went in expecting perfection. And when they got just a good movie, or even in my opinion, a great movie, it wasn't quite there. So it made it here. So there's a danger going in with your hype all the way turned up. And like I said, that's, for me, I went in like that, which I try not to do, but I did go in like that. We were super excited. And it didn't let me down. How about you, Delton? For me, one of the most dangerous things, to your point as well, is that sometimes the hype can be overhype. So going into this, this was the first time in a long time that I gave in to the hype. And I said, you know what? I'm going to throw everything I have behind this movie. I'm going to tweet about it. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to buy the soundtrack going into it. I'm going to do everything. I'm going to wallpaper my house Black Panther if necessary. And one of the great things about it is I wasn't disappointed. Being honest, coming off of the tailwind of Justice League and being severely disappointed with the direction of that film and just the direction of that genre and how the DC universe ended up coming about, or in my opinion, possibly ending, was a little sad. So to see something that was put out there and obviously got great reviews, but also be able to stand on its own and still be able to be as awesome as I thought it would be was pretty awesome to me. It was a very shocking, very impressive for sure, I have to say. So next up on the list of things about this movie that I'm dying to discuss is the fact that this is, I believe, the first Marvel movie since the very beginning of the Marvel Cinematic Universe that allowed a character's story to live without other characters from other movies. You didn't see Avengers popping up every 30 seconds. You didn't need Tony Stark to pull the movie. You didn't need Captain America and Black Widow poking their heads in. I think that made this movie stronger. Because you had such a solid narrative and such a great message going through this movie, adding any of them into the mix, I think would have taken away from the movie really badly. And I'm glad that they had the idea and the foresight to feel that adding in these Avengers just for the sake of adding them in wasn't necessary. I know that's one of my biggest complaints with the Captain America movies is they can't give him his own movie. It's got to have half the Avengers in it to be a good movie. Yeah. I was really scared they were going to do that with this movie, that we were going to get a little ways into the movie and all of a sudden he was going to team up with Captain America, or Iron Man was going to swoop in and save the day. That is not what this movie is. Did you guys kind of feel the same way?
I would definitely agree with that. In my opinion, I feel like, and we'll dig into this a little bit deeper further into the review as we get into more points, I feel like this is Marvel beginning to pass the torch. Going into this movie, we'd seen a little bit of Black Panther, and we'd seen that he's a force to be reckoned with, and he's very powerful. Getting to see some of the technology that goes into that character existing, I feel like there's a good chance that this could be the next Iron Man. Like, that if we have to pass the torch on to the next characters, that this could be the person leading the charge. Getting into that mindset, moving on, as we get into Infinity War, where, anything could happen at this point, I feel like this is the perfect setup movie for that. And it does a really great job of, without having to have all these characters as crutches, it stands on itself very well. What did you think, Delton?
Part of the thing that I think is so amazing about this movie is it really sets up Marvel moving into the second phase that it seems that they're going in, of these characters being able to stand alone. And I think going forward, a universe that could possibly exist without Tony Stark would be kind of cool and kind of awesome. And to understand that you don't need Iron Man in every film for it to be successful, or you don't need 100 cameos to make it successful, is really awesome to me. And I think it's something that Marvel should continue with. I think it'd be great for them to continue with that idea.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, when you really think about it, we already know that Robert Downey Jr. wants to stop doing these. Not only do we have this character with Black Panther running this country and, being the king of this country, but you also have him moving forward at the end of the movie, which we'll talk about more a little later, where he is reaching out and kind of guiding the world. And I actually didn't think about the fact that he could be that step forward for this universe until you guys mentioned that, but I could completely see that working, because he is kind of the one that's showing the world the way. And if they accept it, I mean, the line obviously was, what is the farm country gonna to do to help us? But if they accept it, and we'll see a little bit of that in Infinity War, because he's in the Infinity War trailer a lot, I feel that they could position him in a way where he could be a major player going forward, especially now that he's not part of this secretive country. He's part of a country that's kind of opened their borders. So I'm very interested to see if that is what they're going for, and that is what they go with. And I hope they do, because this character can definitely hold its own. And that's amazing, because if you watched our Civil War review, you'll know that I did not care for Black Panther in that movie. And the reason I didn't care for him in that movie is because I felt that he was one-dimensional in that movie until the very end, because he was after revenge, obviously, which you would be if someone killed your father. But he was so after revenge, he didn't care about anything else. He wasn't a hero in that movie. He was not even a vigilante, he was worse. He was just seeing red is what he was in that movie. And I don't feel that that's a very well-written character. Now, with that being said, now that I see where they took that character and his natural progression from the end of Civil War to the end of this movie, I absolutely love it. I love what they did with it, and I see what they were doing, and I feel that I might have judged the character a little too early. That I judged the character only reading the first few pages of his story, not understanding that there was so much more coming. That's quite the eye-opening experience. I know that you really dug him in Civil War. That was kind of the iconic piece in Civil War. Yeah. But I kind of had the differing opinion of that. I know when we did our review, that was an area of contention, because if I recall, you really liked him in Civil War as well.
Yes, I enjoyed him as a character in Civil War, and I feel like it did a really good job of replacing what the original storyline was. Yeah. That, we didn't have the same setup. People knew who Captain America was. People knew who Iron Man was. So there wasn't this need to have like a registration or anything like that. There wasn't a big point of contention that they could have used without fabricating one. And I felt like the way that they set the story up, Black Panther's character is central to that. It's very important to move that storyline forward. And I knew going in that this was just going to be set up for more to come. They're not going to just show us a character and then take it away from us, especially when it comes to the heroes of these films. Being able to experience the first part of that journey, and then now being able to see moving in towards the middle parts and get to, know the character more and know the background more and know the team that he has around him, it's kind of easy to see the reason why he behaved the way that he did. Specifically because of the way that their culture works, that they have this profound connection with the dead, and that they have this ability to connect with past kings and past, people in their lives. It's really interesting to see the way that they presented that and the way that they helped to move the character forward in this film.
And understanding this character, for me in Civil War, for many people, and maybe we might talk a little bit about this later, but for those of us who've been kind of connected to this character, there were a lot of Easter eggs inside of Civil War. A big part of it was the ideological part of it around the Panther God. That section where he talks with Black Widow about his father's beliefs and even paints an imaginary picture of what that might look like when he was talking about Bast and Sekhmet and his father being led into the green belt where he could live or run forever. We actually got to see some of that in this movie. We got to see what that could look like in relationship to the rest of what else is going on. So for me, it was a part of that. It lived up to it because it set it up in the beginning and talked about it, but it also went ahead and showed us. Mm-hmm. And that's the biggest thing that's been difficult with me in the last several films was we talk about a lot of things, but we wouldn't always show it. And I think just with superhero movies in general, that's something that they could do a better job of, especially when they know that it's going to extend to a second, third, fourth, fifth movie and so on.
The idea that they're rushing through the story to get to the action, I felt that about a lot of the Marvel movies, but they didn't do that here.
No.
I mean, they do kind of teach you the idea of what Wakanda is and where it came from in the first 5 minutes of the film with that kind of storytelling mode they did, which I enjoyed because I didn't know a lot about that. And them kind of establishing that at the beginning is important because it gives them more time during the movie to establish who the characters are and why they're important. Because, as I said in the spoiler-free review, there are a lot of characters, and they are all fascinating. Let's talk about the villain a little bit, because to your point in the spoiler-free review, this is one of the rare Marvel villains that is really fleshed out. This is not a one-dimensional villain. Normally, these movies, they focus on the heroes, and the heroes are really well fleshed out, and they're multi-layered, and they're nuanced, and there's all kinds to them. And then the villain is just there to be the foil to the hero. That's not the case here. This villain was in place to not only give you an idea and give you a kind of a perspective from an outside perspective, but also to help Black Panther grow, to help T'Challa grow. And I feel that not only did the villain grow by the end of the movie, but it helped everyone around him kind of grow as well. And when you have a villain that makes that kind of an impact, it's not just we overcome the bad guy, yay, we won, but it's the impact is felt going forward with these people. That is what a true villain is. That's what a villain should be. Being that they gave you the story that he was the son of the original king's brother, and he was left, and that was a choice he made, and then you kind of understand where all this anger came from, and how he's lashing out, and he feels the way he learned how to do things in the Western world is the way that everybody should do things, and the Wakanda way of life kind of butts heads with him. I mean, that's a very gloss over the story because there's so much more than that to who he is. I feel that by the time we get to the end of the movie and he does die, I feel that not only had he gone through a cycle and changed, but T'Challa went through a cycle and changed. The people that witnessed and experienced him at the chamber went through a cycle and changed. And even the tribe leader that sided with him went through a cycle and changed. What he did changed everybody. I almost question if what he did changed everybody more than what Black Panther did. And that is huge. I mean, when you have a villain that's equal to your hero in impact, that's huge. What did you think about that aspect?
Well, I think one of the things that wasn't the antithesis of the movie for me was the fact that you could have this anti-Black Panther in the sense of there's somebody who's equal to him and actually somebody who is just as entitled as he is, that deserves to have the throne. And I think this movie does a great job of showcasing the fact that good and bad isn't always black and white, and that it's actually, sometimes it's just a perspective. Because one of the best type of villains that you can have is one that you could see in another life or in another slight story or maybe with another choice, be the hero. And I think that Killmonger did that. Yeah. He definitely, by the end of the movie, I was thinking, wow, he could have truly been king. And if he would have thought it out a little different or maybe acted slightly differently, he might have gotten a different outcome. Yeah.
I mean, there's a point in the movie where and I don't know a lot of the names as well, but the lead royal guard, so to say, she's told that they murdered T'Challa, and she's like, No, that's not what happened. That was honorable combat. He won. He is king. I protect the king.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, that is actually what happened.
Yeah.
While we might not agree with what he's trying to do, and we might not agree with the way he's doing it, he didn't just walk in and murder him. And that really shows that there's just more nuance to this story that you originally think there will be. It really makes you think about it. Just because you don't agree with someone's opinion doesn't mean they're necessarily wrong. Yeah. And it definitely doesn't necessarily mean they're the villain. And I really think they explored the gray area in this movie, and that is super important because superhero movies never explore the gray area, unless you're Watchmen, but Watchmen's on a different level. So,
absolutely.
What did you think?
So to touch a little bit on the point specifically about the second combat scene when it came to fighting for the throne, that sort of thing. If you really look at it from what's true and what's in front of you, T'Challa is the one that cheated. He had someone from his group step in and try to protect him, and that's against the rules, very against the rules. And so by doing that, it's interesting to see that the person who our perspective is the hero was the one that actually kind of didn't fight fair and still lost. He was handled pretty well. Just to dig into Eric's character a little bit more, he has this background and he was able to see things from a perspective that you can't see behind this curtain, behind this, behind all this technology and this wall that they've built to protect themselves, for good reasons, but still kind of kept out some of the current events and kept out all of the things that are making the world tick at this point in time. His character is able to see those things from the front lines, not just from, putting his life on the line as a soldier, but also just from growing up in a pretty bad neighborhood and coming upstairs and finding his father dead on the floor and knowing what happened and, going through and getting to learn some of the lore about where his background would have been from had he been born in Wakanda, and the things that he would have been able to see and do had he been given his birthright, in his opinion. Seeing, the strife of people outside of Wakanda and the things that Wakanda could do to help those people who are in trouble. Like I said, those motivations are stronger than any other motivations that have been in the Marvel Universe, period. And I feel like this is easily the most understandable and best villain that we've had so far. Right up there with the Vulture, right up there with Loki. Like, it's a character that holds scenes, and, when he speaks, you stop and you listen and you take note. Because you want to understand his point of view and you want to understand his perspective and why he feels that way. And it's telegraphed beautifully through the script.
Yeah, and while I feel that the Vulture and Loki are amazing villains and the very few examples of good villains in this universe, I actually feel that Killmonger was even better. And I think the reasoning why is because there was no point where I looked at Loki and said, I understand why he's doing this. He's just power hungry. He's entertaining and he's nuanced, but he's just still got that little bit of mustache twirling villain in there. And I think that Vulture was the same way, that he had that mustache twirling villain in there. I didn't see any of that in Killmonger. While I didn't agree with his way of doing things, and I didn't agree with what they were trying to accomplish, I understood 100% why he was doing it. He did not have negative intentions at all. As a matter of fact, you could probably talk to people that have seen that movie that might have a different life experience than me that might look at him as not being the villain, that might agree with what he was saying and what he was trying to accomplish and feel that the other side was naive. And I think that is the beauty of that character, is that we call him the villain because the movie kind of constructs it that way, but I really don't think he was a villain. I just think he was someone that I disagreed with. And his life experiences made him come into it in a very extreme way. But it's not like he just came in and started killing people. I mean, except for Claw, but I mean, Claw's not the greatest person in the world either, although a really awesome character. The idea of Killmonger is what we need to see more of. I want to see more villains that are not mustache twirling. I use that term all the time when we're talking about Marvel or DC. It's that villain that just comes forward and they're just there to beat the hero. And that's pretty much it. If you were to ask them why at any point during their plan explanation, they wouldn't really have an answer for you.
Right.
It's like, well, more power. But why more power? What are you going to do with more power? Well, I don't really know. But if you were to ask Killmonger those questions, I guarantee you he would be happy to have a conversation with you about it.
Yeah.
Because he's very, very thought through these ideas. That's what makes a good villain. And I am just fascinated by him as a villain. I bring him closer to Ozymandias than I do Vulture and Loki. I really do, because he has that depth. And that just makes me appreciate this movie so much more. especially since there's so little of that in the Marvel Universe. So another character in this movie that was very interesting and was another villain, and while he was closer to the line of mustache-twirling villain, he wasn't all the way there, and it was Claw. This character was obviously introduced in a previous movie, and we kind of had it telegraphed that he was going to be one of the main villains in this from the trailers. But I really like the way they did him. He feels like he's super confident, very power hungry, and he seems like he's going to be a player through the whole movie. Like, this is going to be a big deal, and then Eric just shoots him. He just takes him out. And not only did he shoot him, but he shoots his girlfriend first. I mean, this is a man that has a plan. This is a man that definitely has a focus. Now, normally when you see a villain disposed like that, out of nowhere as a surprise, you would think that his impact was small. But Claw's impact was not small.
No.
It was huge in this. Not only is it where the conversation started with Martin Freeman's character about what Wakanda really is, but he's also part of the reason why Eric was even able to get where he was in the first place. You find out so much through Claw's character, and you can tell that he kind of had his hands in everything that led up to Eric getting to Wakanda. And I feel that that makes the Claw character important. Not as important as Killmonger, but important. What did you think about Claw?
I feel like it reminds me a little bit of Last Jedi and what they did with Snoke and with Kylo Ren. They build this big baddie that you see in trailers and that you understand has this great weight and that is known, all over the place. Where everybody is talking about Claw, no one is talking about Killmonger. But he has this track record that you can see how he was able to manipulate and use that confidence against him. And it's interesting to see that, like, a character who thinks that he has everything in front of him has somebody who he thinks is in his inner circle who's been playing him from the start. And because the start of this whole arc was his father working with Claw to steal vibranium from Wakanda, he has this little vendetta that he may not even know about, because honestly, it comes as a little bit of a surprise that this is his kid, that there was a kid involved in it at all, until they show you. And then everything starts to click and you're like, this is really layered and it really has a lot of weight to it. And the reason why he's using Claw to an end, even up to the point where he kills him and takes him to show his body to try to turn some of Wakanda against T'Challa, he's just 3 steps ahead all the time. I feel like Claw makes Killmonger the villain that he is. Without that, almost a small mini villain foil, without that additional push and without that additional weight, Killmonger wouldn't be as interesting a character. So having this person who you think is going to be the person you're fighting against the whole time turn out to be the person who was essentially the reason why the real villain came to be who he was it's something that's interesting and it's new, and I like the way that they're doing it.
Yeah, I mean, you look at, it's an excellent analogy with the whole Snoke thing, because everybody wanted to know who Snoke was. Yeah. The answer was, doesn't matter who Snoke was. Kylo Ren is who you should have been paying attention to. And this is exactly the same concept. Not exactly the same, but it's the same concept. We all wanted to know what Claw was going to do, what he was going to become, what his plan was. It didn't matter what Claw's plan was. It was Eric's plan that mattered. It was Killmonger's plan that mattered. And that's what it was. He was there to catapult the other character into the spotlight, and I honestly didn't see that coming when he did that. It caught me by surprise. What did you think of Claw?
I think with Claw, if we roll back to Age of Ultron and we look at just the weight that was given to the character in regards to, this is somebody who, was the only person to ever make it out alive out of Wakanda with vibranium, and then want to go back for seconds and thirds. It was, without a lack of a better term, it was a lot of hype. It was a lot of buildup in the fact that we think this guy's near impenetrable. We think that he's, he can't be touched. If he's done it before, he can do it again. And it was very interesting to see him kind of take a backseat to Killmonger, in the sense that we thought the whole time the anti-Black Panther was going to be Claw. We were going to see Claw shooting up Wakanda and trying to take it over by force. And I think it leads to a very important point that empires don't fall from external forces, they fall from within. And sometimes it's those things from within that you can't see that have the biggest weight. And I think Killmonger, being that, illegitimate son, or son that was abandoned by his king, was kind of that catapult for the story, and was kind of that push forward to say, even somebody who's discarded, who has royal blood, can still claim the throne. Yep. And I think that was one of those main points of contention in the movie that, for me, really helped to make it believable. Was like, this wasn't just some random guy who got let into the country, but Claw was the price of admission. And what's crazy is he knew that Claw would be the price of admission, that no one would dare mess with him if he brought Claw's body back to Wakanda and said, here you go, now I'm king.
So next up on the character list, and we're going to discuss all these characters because, like I said before, these characters are amazing. I think we need to talk about Okoye, the one that was in charge of the Royal Guard, the one that kind of follows Black Panther around. I watched a movie recently that we did not review called Proud Mary that was trying to make a strong female lead and just botched it. Completely botched it. I feel that this character was the definition of a strong female character. I feel that she held her own with everybody else. The fact that she was female had nothing to do with it. She was just one of the warriors in this culture. And I absolutely love that about this character. Not only did she have that voice of reason and she had that duty to her country and she truly believed in what Wakanda was and what Wakanda was doing to the point where she was willing to put her life on the line, but she was also the voice of reason for people that didn't really look at things the way they probably should have. Yeah. Like we mentioned earlier, when she's approached and like they killed T'Challa, she's like, that's not what happened at all. There was no murder here. This was honorable combat, and he won, and now he's king, and that's the way we do things. Whoever sits on that throne, that's who I guard. And it wasn't until the person on the throne wasn't following the rules that did she even question anything. Yeah. I mean, this is someone that is honorable and respectful and very powerful. I actually probably would rather fight T'Challa than her, to be honest with you. I don't want nothing to do with her in a fight. She was amazing. And the way she acted the character and the way she had a presence, and even the humor when she had the wig on and the dress, her character added to the movie. And I feel that without her there, I don't feel we would have gotten the same feeling for what the culture of Wakanda is. Because you really saw the inclusive nature of that culture through her character, as well as the other character that ends up with T'Challa. You see just equality of all kinds, and I feel that her character more than any of the others really exuded that. She really showed that this culture is ahead of the times in a lot of different ways. I absolutely love that character, and I can't wait to see what they're going to do with her in future movies, because you know they're going to keep using her because she's amazing. So what did you think of that character?
Well, I think with Okoye, one of the big points is, like, if we look at the culture of Wakanda and we look at the Dora Milaje and we look at just the throne itself, so much of the throne is held up and held together by women. Mm-hmm. You look at all the key points of T'Challa and his character, and you think about, who does he go to for advice, right? His mother. Who does he go to for his technology? His sister. Who does he look to for protection? His head guard, right? And her royal guard that work together with them. So I think it's very important to note that there's powerful women in Wakanda, and even to the point to where you question, could T'Challa be T'Challa without them? Yeah. Right? And you look at even, for example, his father, T'Chaka, right? And how he ruled on the throne. And you look at that and you realize, wait a minute, there were other powerful women that were involved in his life. Mm-hmm. So it's very important with her character to understand that she's not just a strong female character, she's a strong character, period. Yeah. So I think that's one of the big points of the movie.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What do you think?
So, with characters that are played by actors that are really known for one big role, sometimes you can kind of get stuck in seeing that person or that character on screen, even though you're watching something completely different. And with Danai Gurira, it's, Michonne from The Walking Dead. Going into seeing the trailers and everything and seeing her on, in stills before the film came out, it was hard for me to separate those things because I've watched the majority of The Walking Dead, and her character is a very central key figure in that world. But seeing her performance and the way that she was able to separate herself from her characters and just dive right in was incredible to see. She is a master of her craft. She's an excellent actress. And the character itself does, it just exudes strength and power and duty and having this, almost to a fault, this, love for her country. Like I said, it's a character that you can really pick apart and you can really dig into and see, the morals and the reasons why she is the way that she is. It's interesting to see the way that they presented the Royal Guards in general, because the way that they are played out in the comics is very similar. It had, they have to be BA because they're protecting one of the the best superheroes on the planet, So they have to be able to go tit for tat and be able to keep up. And showing the things that she's able to do is, just proof of that. And I feel like without having those strong female characters in his life, he wouldn't be who he is. It's not a question of would he be who he is, he just flat out wouldn't.
Yeah, I think that really shows something about our society, that it's not just a strong character, it's a strong female character, when, to your point, it was just a strong character. And it shows that Wakanda kind of thinks the way, just a strong character, not a strong female character. And half of the ruling council was female. You really get the idea that they don't see color, they don't see race, they don't see gender, they just see people. And I feel that having them coming forward to help the world at the end of the movie is fantastic. I almost wish there was a Wakanda in real life so that they can come forward and make the world a better place. It's kind of sad to think of that. But it's a beautiful thing that they craft, and they don't pull a lot of attention to that. And that's the beauty of it, because it isn't a strong female lead like we said. It's just one of their strong warriors.
So one of the things that I think is important throughout the film is that there's this whole idea of, regardless of your background, your race, your gender, that you're able to kind of be who you're meant to be. And I think with Wakanda, we could learn a lot from that in regards to the conversation around just around equality in general. And I think the big overtone of this film was that in a nation like this, in a world like this, you could have a country that could stand on its own, that you could have a culture or a group of people that could take pride in what they've done before. And I think part of that conversation was around like Killmonger, when he mentioned at the end about being okay being buried at sea because he didn't want to be in servitude, that he'd be okay drowning in the ocean rather than being in bondage, was kind of a nod to heritage in this country, and the fact that, a lot of people felt this movie was politically charged. And I think in some respects they were right, and in other ways they kind of missed the point of it, is that it wasn't about one political agenda or the other, but more so kind of shedding a light for us, saying, hey, this is how we could all be if we were proud and believed in each other and stood on each other's shoulders, what we could become. So I think it was very interesting too. Wakanda had that whole kind of Asgardian look to it, in a way that even though it was here on Earth, it kind of seemed like it was otherworldly. Mm-hmm. And it kind of like was, in my opinion, at times, it seemed very utopian. And it was an interesting paradigm shift with the film.
I agree. I can't help but feel that there were a lot of political messages in this movie, but none of them were heavy-handed. It was just talking within the context of stories. There was a line about refugees. There was a line about equality. There was the callback to slavery. The only time you really heard someone call attention to something was Eric. Because, like I said, he came from our society, like I said earlier. They did a really good job of just telling the story. They didn't need to be heavy-handed, because you're going to take out of that movie what you were going to take out of that movie. The messages are there if you're paying attention. And I think that's the best way to do it. Yeah. Don't get preachy like a lot of movies do. You don't have to get preachy to give a good message. This did it the right way. What do you think, JB?
Obviously, I talk about this a lot when we talk about pops, when we talk about movies. Representation is key. And I feel like that's not necessarily something that just equates to race, to gender, to sexuality, to any of those things. It also is something that's important about ideologies. This movie didn't just have one of those things. It had, we're here, we should protect ourselves, coming from T'Challa at the beginning, and coming from the other people who are in the Council of Wakanda. Like, we need to focus on us and make sure that we are the way that we need to be and not worry about everyone else. And then you have someone like Eric, whose character, has seen, all the struggles of the people who exist outside of that utopia, wants them to have the ability to, seize the power that he feels they deserve, which, is definitely something that's how a lot of people feel. They feel slighted and they feel like that they could do better, which is, something that's potentially true as well. And then you have a character like Nakia, who's kind of in between those two ideologies, feels that the world is struggling outside of Wakanda, but you don't have to go to war, and you don't have to step on someone else in order to get better. It's just, you have to get out there and you have to make the effort, and you have to put your cards on the table and say, hey, we're here and we can do what we can to help. And if everybody had that mentality, you could potentially see places like Wakanda everywhere. You're not looking at someone's gender. You're not looking at someone's race. You're not looking at the way that someone feels on the inside as something that defines them. And that's poignant at this moment in time in our society and our history. I feel like if more movies are able to present an entertaining film and also present messages like that, that we'll be better off because of it, and more people will find their voices and find their true opinions and really begin to spark true debates and try to get us to that point where we're progressing and we're moving forward as a society. I would love to see that, and I would love to be one of those people who can champion for people who don't necessarily get to have that voice and that platform. I feel like I do that an okay job of that here with my position in our little group here. You know, I get to say the things that I want to say and speak for people who might not get to say the things that I do.
So now we're actually going to talk about the story a little bit more. I know I've had an opportunity to bring up some topics that I dig into the story and kind of go a little deeper into what was important to me, but I haven't really given these guys an opportunity to dig into some of the pieces of the story that really stuck out to them, so I want to do that. How about you, JB? What in the story really stood out to you that we haven't covered already?
There are some things that kind of get left on the table when discussions like this happen sometimes, and I feel like this movie does a really good job of taking its source material and lifting it up on high. The story that they present is something that anybody can, relate to, and anybody can find a way to enjoy. The things that they're able to bring in from the comics, the characters and the way that they behave, like Martin Freeman's character is an original, like, Black Panther character. That's, like, was part of his deal. Like, he was, essentially, T'Challa was, like, an ambassador of Wakanda. Also with his Black Panther things going on as well, being a superhero. But he was kind of like his liaison. He was the person who was always around, and it's really interesting to see the way that they tied this character in, and they made him something that was a little more whole than he was in Civil War, and something a little more complete. And you could see some of his leanings in the way that he felt about things and how those things changed when he was able to see what Wakanda was capable of doing, because his first initial reaction to what he was told by Claw was, that's ridiculous, that's too good to be true, like there's no way that that's actually what's happening, and was angry that what he'd been told in the past wasn't necessarily the truth, that he'd been lied to. But when he saw it in action and saw what they were able to do, without all of the barriers of the outside world bringing them down, it struck him in awe. He was able to change his way of thinking and kind of get to the point where he was able to see what benefits he could potentially bring back to real society, I think that those things are super important. I think that it ties it all together when it comes into the end, and you can see how he stands up when it comes to the battle and when it comes to what he's capable of doing after they've shown him the kindness of making him better when he was shot and wasn't able to keep moving forward, the things they were due to help him. That scene in particular, the interrogation and the way that things exchange, I felt like it was something where it kind of alluded to some things that were coming. It showed that there was a different side to Killmonger, that there was a little bit left that he'd kept to himself that we hadn't seen yet. It was the small noticing of him wearing the ring around his neck. It was the way that everybody behaved in that moment, like he knew what was going on and he knew what to do, and almost like he had set everything up on purpose, like he wanted Claw to get caught. And it's just little nuances like that show, like I said, how good of a chess player he is. You really feel like he, is always pulling the strings. Like everybody has their kind of set paths and the things that they believe, and that he counted on those things, and that he was able to exercise his intelligence on the battlefield by kind of playing everybody to their strengths and pitting them against each other. It put him in a situation where he was able to move himself forward in the story and put himself in a place where he was able to take advantage and make his attempt to usurp and take power. He's the integral centerpiece to this story because he has his hands in everything. Without a character that strong, without a performance that strong from Michael B. Jordan, I don't know if this movie would have been as good. So I feel like I've kind of wrapped up some of my points on the story, and like I said, how I feel like the characters were really integral in making the story work. Was there anything about the story that you felt like you still wanted to talk about before we move on to the next thing?
Yeah, I think one of the big moments for me is getting that connection to the culture and feeling very rooted in Wakandan heritage, I think is really important. Just from the stance of needing to understand how big some of these sequences are. For example, the first fight at the waterfalls that took place, and the whole idea of the crown not being something that's handed down, right, but something that's earned. And you see this even with T'Challa's father, T'Chaka. You see that when he's interacting with his own brother, the fact that he's willing to take his own brother's life to preserve the crown is something that's super, super important, I think, in this story. And it's kind of that whole idea, even with Okoye, of like Wakanda over everything, even over bloodlines, even over personal relationships, Wakanda over everything. So I think is important. One other thing that we touched on maybe a little bit earlier was the spirit realm, or the ancestral plane that they talked about, and just understanding just some of the rituals and just kind of culture that goes into that. And I know we touched on it a little bit, but just how important the Panther God is to this group of people and how they worship him. So for me, one of the big turning points in the story, which didn't seem like a huge turning point maybe to a lot of people around me, like my wife, she didn't really know about Black Panther, but when they set fire to the heart-shaped herbs, that's like huge. That'd be like equivalent to like setting your ancestors on fire, or desecrating somebody's tomb. It was that big of a deal, or going to a church and desecrating an altar. It seemed that heavy for me when I saw that. So it just proved that Killmonger was willing to do whatever it took to achieve the throne. And I think that's something that in the story and in the cinematic universe that's important, because like you guys mentioned earlier, having mustache twirling villains, they don't really, even though they may try to get at the superhero, let's say Thor and Loki, for example, you always have this sense of like, even if Thor put Loki away like he's done before, that Loki will always come back. And it's one of those situations where with Killmonger, I didn't get that sense. I got that sense of like, he's on his last ride. He's willing to throw 100% behind this, because he probably won't make it out alive. Like, if he fails, he's not going to come back. So, and rightfully so in the movie, that's what happens. So with Killmonger, one of the things with him is that he's willing to throw everything behind what he believes in. And I think to T'Challa's point, he's also willing to do that, but he's not willing to sacrifice his heritage to do it. So I think that was an important point of the film, is to respect where you've come from.
Absolutely. So now that we've got a chance to talk about the story, let's dig into the action. Because while this movie didn't have necessarily as many action scenes as you would expect from a lot of the superhero movies, the action scenes were amazing, the ones that were there. I really, really enjoyed the shootout in the bar casino area, and then the fight that occurred in the cars afterwards. You see it in the trailer, and you're like, this, you don't really know much about it. You see him kind of put his claws into the tire and all that. I was not prepared for that. That was amazing. When she throws this, first of all, she's riding on the top of the car with a spear. Then she throws the spear through the other car into the ground, which then crashes into the spear. That is just amazing.
Yeah.
In those scenes, you expect the hero to do things like that, but everyone did something in that scene. It was amazing. His sister was remote driving the car for him. I mean, it was great. And they still had a little time for comedy in that scene where the car gets blown up and she's sliding along in the chair. I just thought that was great. Plus, you see them trying to avoid combat in the casino, and that just wasn't going to happen. The second it hits the fan, everything just throws down. And, I mean, they're flipping people everywhere, and it was amazing. That whole sequence was amazing. One of the best action sequences I've probably seen in the last couple of years when it comes to superhero films. I really, really enjoyed that. Not to mention the fact that the two challenge scenes, which I would kind of consider action scenes, although dramatically they're very important. The two fights, I was so emotionally on board with both of those fights. Even with the first fight, where you're 99.9% sure he's going to win, I was still really curious how it was going to end. What was going to happen? Was he going to kill this guy? Is this going to be important? And you really get to see a piece of him and who he is as a person, T'Challa, when he spares him and says that your people need you, just, trying to give him the benefit of the doubt to break away emotionally and think logically about it. And I really feel that everything about that scene was done perfectly. The spectacle of it, with everybody on the rocks and draining the water and all of that, was amazing. But the fight itself, I mean, really think about it. That was a one-on-one fight. Very seldomly in superhero movies do you get a one-on-one fight of that level that's not superpowered, because they had drained their power. There was no superpowers in that fight, but it was still absolutely fascinating. And in the final fight, I was not expecting armored rhinos, but that was pretty cool. I definitely wasn't expecting that. And I wasn't expecting the way that fight ended and the way that fight started. So obviously the Black Panther and Killmonger are down there fighting. Obviously that's happening. You've got Martin Freeman in the air, his character trying to take out the shipment of weapons. But to me, the fight that really was amazing was the tribes on the ground.
Yeah. When
the Royal Guards realized that they've got to stop him, that he's not truly the king anymore because, Black Panther, because T'Challa's still alive, the whole thing shifts. And then you see that the other group is still willing to fight for him, and it's like this fracture happens right in front of you, and there's so much emotion, and there's so much passion behind that battle that you know what every single one of those people is fighting for. You know what they believe. You know why they're giving their life for this. That was just absolutely mind-boggling to me. Plus, the way it ends, which is the rhino charging at the leader of the mountain tribe, and then her stepping in front of it. It's like, you wouldn't kill me, would you, my love, or whatever? And he's like, oh, absolutely I would. She's like, oh, hell yeah, I would. For this country? Yeah, without question. And you're like, I completely believe her.
Yeah.
She totally would. That just shows a strength beyond just physical strength. I can't gush about how well these action scenes were written. They weren't action scenes for the sake of action scenes. You were learning about the characters, learning about the country, and learning about what was important to these people during these action scenes. So well done. Yeah. What do you think? What stuck out to you?
You made a point that initially their intention was to try to avoid combat. That's not something that you necessarily see from some of the other Marvel films. Mm-hmm. Like in Civil War, the opening scene for that film is them chasing after Crossbones through like a crowded, busy street. And they full on get into combat mode and they start trying to do things, and it tears that place apart. Like, they bring a building completely down. All of these people are, left as collateral damage. The fact that they were willing to try to avoid doing that and tried their best to try to move it out into the street and try to avoid conflict that would put other people at harm was something that's a little bit different. It shows more about those characters, their fortitude, that their ability to recognize situations and try to change that. And I felt like that was something that was very important about those scenes. And like you said, everybody plays a part. It's something where everybody's got their thing that's going on. The scenes that you see in the trailer, while you see them in the trailer and you know that they're coming and you expect them, there's little things that you wouldn't have known about. Like, the one thing that you don't see is that he has this cool new suit that's able to capture energy and transfer it back when he's going to fight. It's interesting to see the way that they applied that and the way that, he's able to completely flip the car and all this stuff. Like, those things wouldn't have been possible without that ability. It's something that you take for granted in the trailer, but when you see it, you're like, oh, this makes a whole lot of sense. He's taking the training wheels off the suit and learning more about the abilities that he's getting from the technology that his sister has built for him. And I felt like that was an amazingly well done scene, and it was just something like, it was like a spectacle to behold. When it comes to the tribal combat scenes, I feel like the one thing that you don't expect when you go into watching a Marvel film, you expect these huge, CGI spectacles. You don't expect these hand-to-hand visceral combat scenes. Like, they take Black Panther's powers from him, and they take his suit and his technology from him, and they hand him a shield and a sword and say, show us what you're really made of under all of that. And the fight scenes, like there are moments where like they show from his perspective where he's seeing stars from being hit and showing him push forward and persevere through all of this pain and all of this strife. It's something that you don't see a lot in these type of movies, where it's like, you really feel every time he takes a hit or every time he throws a blow. You feel that in your gut. And it's something that just like stands out and it sticks with you after you walk out of the film. Especially in the second scene where, he's having his butt handed to him by Killmonger. Killmonger is, when it comes to just raw power and strength, he is the better man in every way, shape, and form. You're seeing every time he goes to make a move, he thinks that he's doing the right thing, and Killmonger is one step ahead and cuts him. Every single time he takes a strike. And he drops him to his knees and is just willing to, finish that fight all the way up to the point where one of his closest people, where Zuri has to step in and attempt to protect him. That character was excellently played by Forrest Whitaker. Like I said, even down to like the satellite characters, the little parts. Everything had its place and everything had a reason to be there. Like I said, the characters continue to make all of the other parts so much better based on their performances. Those scenes are, like I said, excellent because there's something that's different and they break away from the tradition that's already been set up by the MCU. In the end, you come back full circle to another one of those huge spectacle fights, and there's a lot going on the ground between all the tribes, and all of that stuff is super interesting and it keeps you engaged and involved. And then you have Ross following remotely from the plane, trying to take out all of the shipments, and they're constantly things trying to break in to try to get at him, and he's doing what he can to try to push through and persevere and make sure that what his role is performed to completion. On top of that, the fight scene after they fall down to the platform where the trains are moving, and the fact that he has the wherewithal to say, get the trains moving, that this is going to be something that I can potentially use to my advantage because I understand Wakanda and I'm on my home battleground. I understand what's happening and I know what I can do. It showed growth in that character. Like I said, when Killmonger beats him in the tribal combat, you obviously don't think that you're not going to get T'Challa back, but you don't see the fact that Killmonger may be better at hand-to-hand combat. He may be a stronger fighter, but T'Challa is a better king and a better Black Panther because he has the capability to utilize his surroundings and was able to get the upper hand on someone who up to this point has had the upper hand in everything, has been a step ahead, if not 2, 3, 4 steps, and is able to figure things out. And even to the point where, before being taken away for some of the final scenes of the film, he admits, as he's being delivered the killing blow, nice move. Like, I'm really impressed by you, and maybe you do have what it takes. Like I said, those scenes just like they all culminate together really well. That, on top of the scene with the rhinos and my love, would you really kill me? That thing, like it's all like there's so much going on, and there's so many huge moments for these characters. I can't wait to see them on screen again.
Yeah.
So one of the most important things for me in the film is them really looking at what came before and especially comic book source material. And I mean, when we look at Spider-Man Homecoming, for example, we all know Peter Parker's story and we've seen it, what it feels like, a dozen times and reboot after reboot. But part of what made Homecoming, I feel, better is that they decided to go in a little unconventional route and give us an almost an assumption of that in Civil War, right? That we all know already. Well, with a character that we know little to nothing about in the MCU, it's important to establish that baseline, right? To say, hey, here's who he is, here's where he comes from. So for me, one of my kind of, oh, wow, this is cool moments is seeing his father be the Black Panther. Because in Civil War, we didn't know that. We didn't know if Black Panther was a mantle that was given from king to king, or if it was warrior to warrior. And even when he was captured by Ross, initially after donning the Black Panther suit in Civil War, when he's talking in the truck to Steve Rogers, right? He's saying as both warrior and king. So it's almost that assumption that he's both.
Yeah.
So it was neat to see his father also be that, and to do it pretty successfully. But another big point of the movie that for me was kind of almost gut-wrenching was when he discovered his father wasn't as good as he thought. And that whole breaking from heritage where he's in the ancestor realm and saying, I don't want to join you. You lied to me. You betrayed me. You didn't tell me what came before and how could you do something like this? So it was very interesting to see that break from tradition with someone who almost worshipped his father.
Absolutely.
Right? In Civil War, you saw that when there was such a great deal of respect between them, that you saw how much he revered his father, how much he wanted to be his father as a king and live up to that example. So that was probably one of the most emotional parts of the film for me, was when he broke away and said, I don't want to be like you, that sense of I want to be better than you. And that was a very important point for me. The other part of it in terms of the culture was just understanding that there were many other Black Panthers before. And again, I think with those who may not have been familiar with the character might have not known that there were others. But just knowing his royal bloodline and how important that was and just how Wakanda was able to preserve itself through that bloodline and that lineage. So I think, again, to everyone's point, Killmonger challenged that lineage.
Yeah.
And him being right in another realm, maybe, or another time, being the rightful ruler of Wakanda. But it's just one of those things that I think with T'Challa it was important for him to understand that journey and that discovery of he doesn't have to be his father to be a great king.
Very cool. Well, let's talk about our last topic here, which is the end credit scenes. There were two, although I almost feel like the last scene could have been interchanged with one of the end credit scenes. So the first end credit scene is T'Challa's speech at the UN. I like the way they did it. It's a very positive speech. It's a very hope-filled speech about how it's their duty to help other people, to share with other people that you can all be part of the same tribe even though you're part of different countries. I like that concept. And I especially liked the reaction, because you knew that reaction was coming from somebody. How is the country of farmers going to share with us? They had already judged Wakanda, and they had already felt that they were one thing when we just found out that they were not that one thing. So, and you see Agent Ross in the background, he's smiling like he knows exactly what's coming. And that's the beauty of this, is people have their own ideas and they have their own concepts that are locked into their mind. And even if they were a country of farmers, they still could have had something to share. But that person just wasn't interested in hearing it. So I want to see what happened next. I want to see how that kept going. And I hope we get some of that, either in behind the scenes or featurettes or something that shows kind of the process between then and Infinity War, where Wakanda did open up fully to the world. I want to see how they were received and how people reacted. It's a fascinating idea. And then, of course, the final scene showing us that the Winter Soldier's alive, that Bucky's alive. He is being taught and protected by T'Challa's sister. T'Challa, basically, that they have him and they are helping him. That is amazing, and it finishes that story for me, where in Civil War I didn't care for Black Panther because I thought he was just seeing red the entire movie. It really shows that he did grow. What I saw as him in the movie isn't really what I should have saw. Apparently there was more to it. I think that's great. Plus, it shows us that he's going to be there for Infinity War, which is awesome as well. Because we know that from the Infinity War trailer, that Cap is also in Wakanda, or is going to be in Wakanda. Get this man a shield, which has now been memed all over. But the point that was made at the beginning of this spoiler review, which is they might be priming him to take over this universe, or at least be a major part of it, is an excellent point. He's either going to be a huge part of Wave 2, or the next wave we have coming, or they're doing something wrong. Because this character not only embodies all that is good, and all that is equality, and all that is right, and just the right thing, but he's also fascinating and entertaining, and I want to see more of him. So we'll start here. What did you think of the end credit scenes?
I wanted more in the UN. I wanted a little bit more. I know that they can't get too big into it. I know that more than likely what happened after that moment in time is he just suited up right in front of everyone.
He had to have.
And that would have been... I would have loved to have seen just jaws dropping and hitting the floor, just like where did all this come from? Like, I would have really loved to have gotten to, be a fly on the wall and get to see that. But I mean, you knew it was coming. So it's not like they left anything out. The speech was absolutely great. And like I said, it embodies his growth as a character, moving away from, his father's ideal of isolationism and moving closer to that idea that if you have something that you can share with the world to make the world a better place, that you should share it, and that everybody should stand together to try to help. That's something that's super key. Like I said, they talk about it in the final scene before we get to the end credits, where he's setting up one of his many, Wakanda centers in Oakland, because that was the place that, Killmonger was born, not Eric, but his his alter ego, and being able to try to make something good from that. That will continue to progress, and I hope that we see more about it, not only in Infinity War, but, moving forward into, more movies centered around this character, because he's absolutely fantastic, and I really want to see more. I'm a huge Captain America fan, so the Winter Soldier is a character that's near and dear to me. Seeing Bucky get his head right is something that I'm definitely about. Is it seems like he's starting to kind of find his balance, and get back to the way he was before he was brainwashed. It'll be interesting to see if he continues to keep the Winter Soldier moniker, or if he ends up being something else entirely when we get to Infinity War. If they give him his arm back, or if they give him something different. I'm
Or if
primed
he
and ready.
becomes Captain America, it could happen. It's happened in the comics.
I'm primed.
We'll see.
Yeah, I'm primed and ready to see more. That's for sure.
Absolutely. I think one of the cool things for me was in the UN speech, him actually, forgive me if I'm mistaken, but him actually picking up where his father left off with the speech. His father didn't get to finish that speech of opening the doors or the gates to Wakanda, and mentioning, you know, being in the shadows for too long and kind of being complacent in the world. And I think it was interesting too, JB touched on this, that, you know, his father was isolationist for a long time. But right before that happened, we talked about in Civil War where the building got blown up. That was actually one of the first peace missions from Wakanda that actually brought them into the spotlight and kind of made them a champion for the Sokovia Accords, which was interesting. So kind of seeing him go full circle and then go back to the UN after losing his father, and then picking up his father's speech, and now not only having his father's ideals behind him, but now his own. It was very interesting to me. Definitely for me, the whole time in the Bucky scene, the whole time I don't know about you guys, but the whole time I was waiting to see the Soul Stone or something, see some type of nod towards Infinity War. Now I know Bucky's going to play a part of that. And we've seen in the teaser trailers the battlegrounds that seem to happen in Wakanda. Now something starts there or is going to happen there. So I'm curious to see how that kind of plays in, and how Thanos is going to bring Wakanda into the forefront of everything. And maybe, I don't know, call me crazy guys, but maybe them and T'Challa bringing Wakanda out of the dark shadows and into the spotlight maybe puts a little bit of a bigger target on his back, especially for Thanos coming into the scene saying, you know, where are these stones at to collect them? And I think going after such a powerful place would definitely make sense, you know, with it being so bright. And I can't help but wonder if maybe the stone itself is at the heart of the mountain where all this vibranium is at. So that's just something that kind of reminds me of...
Possible.
Yeah, it's an interesting theory, that's for sure.
Kind of reminds me of Lord of the Rings and specifically The Hobbit, you know, when they went for the heart of the mountain with Smaug, and how that all kind of played out. But maybe the mountain, the king under the mountain is T'Challa instead of a troll, right?
Yeah, it's definitely for sure that Thanos is going to be a paradigm shift for sure. It's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out and what we've learned today means moving forward for this universe.
10 years in the making. Get to Infinity War.
A couple of months away.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you made it all the way through this video, you must have been just as passionate about this movie as we are, because this is a long video. But there's a lot to talk about with this movie. I'd love to know what you think. This is a safe place for spoilers. If someone's on this page for this video, they're okay with spoilers. So go ahead and put what your thoughts are down in the comment section below. Anything goes. I'd love to open some discussions with you guys. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. We release 4 videos a week at minimum, including 1 movie review, usually a pop video if there's news, and then 2 gaming videos. Don't forget, we have t-shirts available just like this one. We have different colors to choose from. We have a link down in the description for that. We hope you'll follow us into the Vortex. We'll see you next time.